Welcome to Swimming with Allocators,
the VC podcast from the LP perspective,
with your hosts, Alexa Benz
and Ernest Sweat. You ready? Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Swimming with Allocators. I'm Ernest Sweat. Today, Alexa and I are joined by Zach Ruchman, who is at HB Wealth. He focused there on building private market portfolios for high net worth families across venture, private equity, real estate, and credit. Zach's career has taken him from a Fulbright fellowship in Jordan to consulting, to BlackRock, and now allocating capital across private markets. Alexa and I got an opportunity to talk to him about why venture investing requires comfort with long-term uncertainty, why fund size defines your strategy as a fund manager, and what actually helps managers stand out when there are thousands and thousands of venture firms competing for LP attention. With that, here's our conversation with Zach.
Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it, Zach. Your path has been anything but linear. Ernest mentioned consulting, the Fulbright, now HB. Is there a thread connecting things, or have you sort of discovered your true north in this process?
Yeah, obviously it's been it's been a non-traditional pathway, to be sure. I think that being an LP is probably secretly the best job in finance, and I love what I do. So I'm hoping that this is true north here. But certainly, I think every stop that I've had through my career has been a really important stop in my career that makes me a much better allocator. If I think about living in the Middle East, working in the international development world, living through the Arab Spring, that was all about learning how to make decisions in uncertain environment and with unclear information, and never knowing what the next thing was going to be that hit the news, and it wasn't the world that I wanted to live in forever. I think spending a year with a revolution on one side of the border in Egypt and a civil war on the other side of the border in Syria, that was maybe a little too much uncertainty, but certainly I learned how to navigate that kind of environment and that sort of complexity. When I think about consulting and Alvarez and Marsal, I think about how to look at large sets of information, how to look at complex business problems and business problems that I didn't necessarily have expertise in, and look for simplicity in that complexity. And I think that that's incredibly important in an allocator role also, where I'll spend 1 hour speaking with a venture firm, and then my next hour is going to be speaking with someone who does aircraft leasing.
You mentioned uncertainty before, and there's a number of things, whether it's technological shift, different generational things, different macroeconomic things. How does that help you, that edge that you presented to us, help you with how to think about the private markets?
I think investing in private markets is all about investing into uncertainty, and whether it's today or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, when you're investing into a 10-year fund, just about anything in private markets, and particularly in venture, where, let's be honest, that 10-year fund is probably going to be a 15-year fund, and it might even be a 20-year fund. You have to be incredibly comfortable with uncertainty and with the thought about how is technology going to change over that 10 or 20 years. I think that's what's so fun about venture, is that you are investing in the future. You're investing in a very optimistic view of where markets are going and where the world is going, because every venture manager in some way is a hype merchant, and I'm investing in something that's going to change the world, because if it's not going to change the world, honestly, what are you even doing here? Yes. Venture is about finding those moonshots, finding those unicorns. And if I'm going to have illiquidity for 20 years, it better be more than a 3x return. You better be looking for those 10x returns, if not more. The only way that you get 10x returns in any type of investing is if you're investing in something that is going to change the world.
Yeah.
So that's what's fun about venture.
Yeah, just kind of not push back, but also just bring in other things to that point. I totally agree with you that what are you even doing if you're not trying to do that and be a venture GP? But the other thing that's going on is the maturation and professionalization of venture. How does that adjust how you underwrite or what you look for in venture? Because now the marketplace has so many different, tastes and offerings. And so people are trying to say there's different ways to do venture that may not be the 10x. It might just be like a nominal value that's a lot of money. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's totally a fair point. I think that it depends, as an LP, it depends on what is your cost of capital and what are you looking to achieve from a venture allocation.
Yeah.
We at HB, we always talk about your fund size is your strategy. And I don't think that's a unique insight. I think you've had other guests on this podcast who probably said exactly the same thing. But it's very true, right? If you're raising $1 billion for your venture fund, that's going to translate to a very different strategy than $100 million. And to get a 5x fund off $1 billion, the math that goes into that and the enterprise value that you have to create is so totally different than the enterprise value that you're trying to create from $100 million of a venture fund.
Yeah.
So I don't think the venture math has changed. It's just that there are now $1 billion venture funds out there who have a different cost of capital. Their LPs have a different cost of capital, and that's totally fine as long as everyone is eyes wide open about what's involved in that. I think the traditional venture model is still it's still about that cottage industry. It's still about those smaller funds. It's still about looking for how do we invest in absolute game-changing companies that are going to, drive those power law type returns. That's not for everyone anymore, but to your point, that's because venture has changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And does your approach or strategy differ now that you're working with private clients versus when you sort of had institutional mandates?
So I think there are some things that are very similar. Like at the end of the day, our diligence process is the same. The way I think about managers is very much the same. And part of my value proposition to clients at HB is to say to them, look, we are bringing you a very institutional approach because there are all sorts of people out there who are looking at private wealth and they're saying, hey, there's retail money that doesn't know better and they're going to be our LPs and that'll be great.
Just taking a step back, could you just give an overview for an audience of eager managers and other allocators on just what HB Health is and the organization's history?
Yeah, so HB Wealth, we've been around for 30 plus years. We're a multifamily office and RIA. Today we have a little bit north of 28 billion in AUM. We serve clients all across the country. Our headquarters is in Atlanta, but we have 12 offices all spread out everywhere. I live in Washington, D.C. About 4 billion of our AUM is in private assets of one sort or another. So, private markets is very core to our approach to investing and the way we work with clients. Like I said, I think that institutional approach that we have is a game changer for clients and helps us create portfolios that are customized for our clients and also a very different offering than what they might be able to get at other places where they might think about investing.
How are those offerings packaged? Like from an operational standpoint, how are you getting your clients in?
So, every client is different, and we're really in the business of creating a customized, tailored offering for that client, for that family, understanding, all of their particular needs, goals, desires, We have clients who are very liquid and may want to have a lot of investments in privates because they think that there's the right risk-adjusted return for them there. We have some clients who are very successful entrepreneurs, and they may have most of their wealth tied up in their family business, and then it's very illiquid. So then we're thinking about strategies that are not necessarily tied to what I do every day, right? And the advisor works with that client to think about, how do we get you liquidity? How do we diversify your portfolio? How do we, create that sort of long-term and long-sighted strategy? When it comes to private investments in particular, we have a series of commingled funds that we do on a vintage year basis. We have one for private credit, we have one for private real estate, and then we have one for private equity, which also includes growth equity. Venture, we have a little bit off to the side because, as I've said, it's like, I think venture is a little bit of a different asset class. And so with venture, we're trying to be even more targeted for the individual families that really want that type of exposure. There's obviously a fuzzy line these days between certain kinds of venture strategies and certain kinds of growth strategies. And so, we have some managers in that private equity vehicle that some LPs might squint at and be like, well, this feels like venture to me. Yeah. But, for especially our more early stage venture, we do on a client by client basis.
That's interesting. I remember in our prep conversation, we spoke a lot about just your philosophy in underwriting managers, and there's a number of things that came up. But first, I wanted to bring up how you said you really look at incentive alignment in manager selection. Can you describe kind of what it means to you and how you diligence that?
Yeah, at its core, alignment of incentives is about we all win together and we're all on the same team. We're all partners, right? Like it's right there in the limited partner agreement. It says we're all partners. And that is what we're looking for first and foremost in diligence. So some of it is just about, the economics and making sure that, like I said, everyone wins together. This is part of why I think these larger venture strategies and larger venture managers out there are harder to get to the finish line because the fee income that they get is fantastic and they're less incentivized to outperform, right? If you're getting 2% a year on $1 billion and you have multiple funds that are $1 billion, you're going to be very comfortable. You don't necessarily need that 20% carry to ever hit because you're getting great money just off of your salary from management fees. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why, I tend to spend a lot of time with smaller managers, earlier stage managers where they haven't gotten a lot of carry checks yet in their career, because then everyone's focused on the same thing, which is investment outcomes, as opposed to what happens along the way and fundraising success.
Can you give us any examples of what really good partnership looks like?
Yeah, some of it is really intangible. It's just about getting to know people at a very human level and building trust. That's why I spend a ton of my time on airplanes, on the road, like going to meet GPs in person, and not just sit in their conference room and fire questions at them. That's obviously part of my job. But it's also like, okay, let's get coffee, let's get a drink, let's get dinner, let's really get to know each other so that we trust each other. And so that outside of that very formal diligence setting, I understand how you think, you understand how I think. And so, when we sign that LPA and we're signing up for a 10+ year partnership, that we all really understand what we are getting into and who we are getting into it with. I think part of it is also, I really appreciate it when GPs will pull back the curtain on their investment process, on deals that they're looking at, and not just trot out at the annual meeting, oh, here's the CEO of my best performing portfolio company, and I'm going to let them talk for a few minutes about how great their company is and how great it's doing.
The thing I love about that is it's a tailwind that I'm not sure all allocators or all GPs are embracing, but I have a personal opinion that I think this human first radical transparency is needed to show the differentiation of emerging managers who still maybe have a personal brand, but you're building a brand for an entire platform. And so with that kind of like, radical transparency, I think a lot of people don't do it because there's a fear that you'll be judged but like you said, things are moving so fast that another thing you're looking for is not just like, you can't have stale pattern recognition anymore. You have to actually show that you have a crazy amount of learning velocity. So you're able to pick up things and then move on them. Is that kind of what is also you're seeing of like, this is a new quality? I know in our prep call, you talked about exception recognition.
Yeah.
But is that to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think like intellectual horsepower and deep curiosity is all a part of this, especially in venture where technology is always changing. You want GPs to be always learning about the next thing, because if you're not learning about the next technology, why are you investing in technology? Like, the market will move away from you in the blink of an eye. That said, so this is yes, and I do think that while we want GPs to always be learning and thinking about what's coming around the bend from a technology perspective and updating their priors on where they want to be investing, I also want GPs to stay true to themselves in terms of know what you're good at, know what your deal box is, know what types of companies you understand really well, or what industries you understand really well, or what technologies you understand really well, and don't get out over your skis on that. Have an investment philosophy. If that investment philosophy is what's brought you to this point and it's brought you successfully to this point, don't rock the boat too much also, because yes, past performance not indicative of future returns. We can say that until we're blue in the face, but everyone is also going to look at past performance and say, okay, well, they're raising their next fund. I don't know exactly what companies are going to be in the next fund. So how do I do my diligence on this black box? I'm going to ask myself, what's different about this firm? What's different about this GP? And if you used to invest in, crypto, and now you're going to only do consumer and you're out there doing Labubu futures, that's going to be hard for your LPs to re-up, right? But if you're saying, hey, this has been the evolution, and we went from on-prem to in the cloud, and then we went to the edge, and now we're doing AI, that's a story that I can follow and understand and see the evolution of your thinking about technology and how you've tried to stay at the cutting edge of all of that. And those are two very different things.
Now we're going to take a quick break to speak with our sponsor.
Rebecca, for our GPs listening, why would you recommend their founders choose to work with Sidley?
I would say three things. First, your founders deserve counsel that understands the full life cycle of a venture-backed company. Sidley has one of the deepest benches in the country across the practice areas that matter most to startups: corporate, employment, IP, tax, regulatory, litigation. That means your founder is not going to outgrow their law firm. The team that helps them negotiate their Series A employment agreement can be the same team that advises them through an IPO or a $1 billion acquisition down the road. Second, we understand the investor perspective. We work with GPs, LPs, portfolio companies, which means we know what good governance looks like from every seat at the table. So when we draft a founder employment agreement or advise a board on an executive compensation issue, we are doing it with an understanding of how those decisions will affect the cap table, the investor rights agreement, and the long-term relationship between the founder and the board, which can be so delicate. And the last thing I would say is we're pragmatic. Founders don't need lawyers to create problems. They need lawyers who solve them efficiently and help them get back to what they want to do, which is building their product and building their brand. We pride ourselves on being commercial, responsive, and easy to work with. Our goal is to really be the kind of outside counsel that your founders actually want to call, not the kind that they avoid like the plague until there's a crisis and they have to get you on the phone.
Digging in a little more on your area of expertise, labor and employment, I want to talk about non-compete clauses. And some of the states have been rolling these out. It's banning or narrowing to the ability of workers to move around. And I'm wondering if you're seeing this new regulation have any tangible real effects, or if this is just sort of paperwork.
This is actually one of the most significant shifts in the employment law landscape, I would say, in a generation. And I started practicing in California right before the California Supreme Court decided a kind of landmark non-compete decision. So this has been my entire practicing life, has been dealing with these types of restriction covenants, and it absolutely affects the venture ecosystem. California in particular has always been the standard bearer. Non-competes have been void and unenforceable in California for many years, absent certain enumerated circumstances, of course. But now you're seeing states across the country moving in the same direction. The FTC even made a serious run at a nationwide ban under President Biden, though that effort faced legal challenges and ultimately was shut down last year. There does seem to be kind of movement towards employee restriction. So for VCs in particular, this has a few practical implications. First, if your portfolio companies have been relying on non-competes to protect their competitive position, that strategy, I would say, is increasingly unreliable. You need to assume that your key employees can leave and go work for a competitor tomorrow, and you need to build your protective framework around that assumption. Second, this trend actually increases the importance of other restrictive covenants, right? Things like non-solicitation agreements where you can get them, confidentiality provisions, invention assignment provisions, right? Those remain enforceable in most jurisdictions, and those should be the backbone of your talent protection strategy. I would say for founders specifically, the erosion of non-competes means that a departing founder has more freedom to start a competing venture, and that makes it even more critical to get that separation agreement right when a founder leaves, including clear provisions around IP ownership, confidentiality, and non-solicitation of employees and customers where enforceable.
Can we double click a little bit more on the non-solicitation status too?
Yeah, non-solicitation agreements are on materially stronger footing than non-competes, I would say, from sort of a national perspective, but they are not immune from scrutiny. California, again, most aggressive in this area. There is strong argument and case law supporting the position that non-solicitation provisions are unenforceable in California for both employees and customers, absent certain circumstances. Outside of California, though, most jurisdictions enforced reasonable non-solicitation agreements, typically with durational limits of 12 to 24 months, and the scope limited to employees or customers with whom the departing individual had a relationship. The trend to watch, I think, here is whether the anti-non-compete momentum expands to encompass these non-solicitation provisions more broadly. For now, though, a well-drafted, narrowly tailored non-solicitation agreement remains a valuable and generally enforceable tool in most jurisdictions.
Awesome. Good to know there's something left. For portfolio companies, pretty much everybody has employees now in multiple states. How do you navigate having different restrictive covenants across different states?
This is a real operational challenge, and it really started picking up steam in 2020 for obvious reasons. A lot of people ended up being remote, and a company that previously had employees in a specific centralized location now had employees in 10 different states, right? It's getting more complex as remote work continues to distribute teams across jurisdictions. In the startup landscape, that really is a big trend to kind of limit the overhead operational expenses by having people work remotely. So it's something that people really want to do, right? Is allow people to work from home and, or from a location of their choosing. And so the approach we recommend with respect to the employment documents is to start with a baseline agreement. That baseline agreement will comply with the most restrictive jurisdiction where you have employees, like California, for example, right? And then you would layer on jurisdiction-specific addenda for states where additional protections are available. You also will need to have choice of law and forum selection clauses that are drafted thoughtfully. That's one of those legal things that non-lawyers often just kind of skip over, but those provisions get to dictate which court hears your case, what state's law is going to be applied. And so, they really should be looked at and drafted thoughtfully, because courts will not always honor a choice of law provision if it is designed to circumvent the employee protective laws of the state where the employee actually works. A great example of this is California saying, you can't sign a non-compete with a California employee and then say, if there's a dispute over this, we'll use Florida law, right? That just doesn't work here. And so the practical reality is that a one-size-fits-all restrictive covenant agreement is just not going to work. Especially if you have employees in California, New York, Colorado, Massachusetts, or one of the other states that really has strong protection. So you need a jurisdiction-aware approach, and you need to update your agreements regularly because the law continues to evolve.
Interesting. And are trade secret laws still on our side as VCs and founders?
Unequivocally, yes.
Okay.
The smart money has already made the shift kind of towards this avenue, right? Confidentiality agreements and IP assignment provisions are enforceable virtually everywhere. And what's more important is that they directly protect what actually matters, your proprietary information, your trade secrets, and the intellectual property your portfolio company has developed. A non-compete, even where enforceable, is sort of a blunt instrument, right? It tells someone where they cannot work, but it doesn't actually prevent, in and of itself, the dissemination of confidential information if someone goes to a non-competing employer, for example, or starts a company in an adjacent space. So the best practice I recommend is typically a layered approach. You want to start with a well-drafted confidentiality and invention assignment agreement that every employee, including the founders, signs on day one. You want to make sure it clearly defines what constitutes confidential information, that it includes robust return of property provisions, and assigns all work product to the company. You want to layer on top of that, where you can get it, a non-solicitation provision focused on employees and customers that is reasonable in scope. And then you can invest on top of that operational trade secret protection, which is things like access controls, need-to-know protocols, exit interview procedures, and even forensic capabilities for if you suspect employee misappropriation. The combination of these things in any form is far more effective than a non-compete clause, and it has the additional benefit of holding up in court.
I can see why these employment agreements are getting longer and longer, and why people call you, Rebecca. And now back to our LP interview. What are some of the areas that you're especially focused on? It's got to be something more unique to you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I do think you end up finding yourself having to sort of rejigger Fund 2 on what you're really about.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think look, there are so many venture funds out there in the world right now. I think the last number I heard was there's something like 5,000 venture funds. And I think there's 19,000 McDonald's in America. So if we are a quarter of the way to as many venture funds as McDonald's in America, like if you are trying to raise a venture fund, you really need to work so hard to differentiate yourself from the other 4,999 out there. Because, think about it from the LP shoes. Like if I see even a tenth of those in a given year, like I'm still seeing more than one marketing deck per day. They can all start to blend together pretty quickly unless you've got something really distinctive that you either are trying to say about yourself or trying to say about your investment thesis or your investment philosophy. And, we all get too many emails as it is, and AI is just making that worse. Your email really needs to pop somehow. And, to what we were saying earlier about being authentic, like I think that it just makes that much more important connecting with people out in the real world and us getting away from our webcams and out, like whether it's, in conferences or in coffee shops or wherever it is, but like go out, touch grass, meet people in person, shake hands. because otherwise you're just another email that someone has to look at and triage. And when you get a few hundred emails a day, like I'm sure we all do, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah. Zach, you might start getting, because of this podcast, pitch decks with McFlurries and dollar menus on them, just to kind of align that McDonald's analogy. Anyway, I'm curious on we've brought it up, the whole kind of like AI and stuff like that, and I've heard a number of LPs start to ask me and my peers, what is our tech approach, tech stack? Similar things we're asking founders that maybe came up in the SaaS era. How are they adjusting with the new tools? What's your viewpoint, kind of like piggybacking on this being authentic with the GP's right level of utilizing these tools?
I think it's table stakes on the one hand, right? If so many people are using some sort of technology now, whether it's in their sourcing process, their diligence process, et cetera, like everyone should have it as a part of their process. But that also means that it's become a commodity, or will soon become a commodity. And when I talk to portfolio company CEOs, they'll tell me, several years ago, maybe I got an email a week, maybe it was a few emails a month from GPs saying, hey, I heard about your company. I think you're doing something really interesting. I'd love to get on the phone with you. I'd love to meet you, whatever. I hear from from portfolio company CEOs now who are saying like they get dozens of that email a week. And it's all AI generated. Sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't tell, but it doesn't matter. It's clear like that this is all just spam going out there into people's inboxes. And so it makes it that much harder to get in front of a portfolio company CEO. And from what I hear, open rates just keep going down on those emails. And open rates a couple of years ago, maybe were like 50%, 25%. Now they're probably like 5%, if you even make it through the spam filter. And so, not to again bring it back to authenticity and getting outside.
Given how many emails you're getting, cold pitches, unqualified outreach, is there anything you do want to see more of, or that you're actively looking to invest in venture?
So I think, look, a lot of what we do is network driven, and even though venture has grown tremendously as an industry, even though it has matured tremendously as an industry, there are still a lot of inside networks in venture, and still a lot of relationship-driven deals, a lot of relationship-driven funds in venture, and I don't know how that ever really goes away. So, I think it's not about ooh, I have this amazing thesis about this particular industry or this particular subsector. It's about finding managers who are truly exceptional at what they do and know that they're exceptional at that thing and are going to relentlessly prosecute on that edge that they have. That's what I think is going to be really interesting. And if I can build a portfolio of those managers, that's going to lead, hopefully, to really interesting risk-adjusted returns and outcomes for my clients.
Do you have any examples that you could share of people, being able to show what their authentic kind of superpower is over time with getting to know you? And you can anonymize. You don't have to.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so. Someone who I've been close with for a long time. I've seen him since he was a very junior investor. Has built a really nice track record for himself investing outside the U.S. And he has roots outside the U.S. He's deployed significant dollars into the part of the world where he originally comes from. He's got great relationships there. He understands the tech ecosystem there really well. He was considering spinning out of the firm where he is and where he's done all of this. And I got a first cut of his slides. And it was basically, I'm going to hang out in San Francisco and like just poach people as they walk out of YC and hand them a term sheet. And I was like, dude, yeah, you and everyone else. But like, I know it's in your track record. I've seen you grow as an investor doing all these really interesting deals. Like, talk about how you got here. Do you?
Yeah.
Like, anyone can hang out in front of Y Combinator. That's not interesting anymore. And there are thousands of people in San Francisco who have that same idea. But you understand this whole tech ecosystem in this underinvested part of the world. Talk about that. Like, go prosecute that. And, you know, he reflected on that. He took some of my advice. He didn't take some of my advice. But certainly he's incorporated a lot of that now into his thesis, and he's out there raising a fund. And I'm really excited to see where it goes, because I know everything he's done to date in this space, like it's differentiated. It's not a pitch that you see every day.
Kudos. I just want to say kudos to like providing that feedback, because, you know, it's not your responsibility to, and I don't think, you know, the human psychology for a lot of LPs is like, you know, sometimes you want to keep everything nice and you never know, right? So I think you taking a stand and providing feedback was really helpful. I think it also speaks to the like pressures of when people feel like they are, oh, I'm going to do this very maverick thing and start a firm. But then they're like, I'm going to take all these playbooks that everybody says that I should do, because there's a pressure that like fundraising is a standardized test and not an essay test. And like, you got to realize it's an essay test. And you were like, hey man, it's an essay test.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
Yeah, and
the question-
well, all I was going to say about that, because I love that metaphor, is like nothing about venture is standardized tests. And if you think you're taking a standardized test, like then you're definitely doing it wrong. But it's not just that it's an essay test. Like, it is, venture more than anything is such a maverick industry. And you go all the way back, right? Like, you go back to Fairchild Semiconductors and the guys who spun out of there, like, into what was one of the very first venture-backed companies ever in history. Like, that was the most maverick thing you could possibly do in that time and place in American history. Like, you didn't do that. The entire history of venture is mavericks, whether it's on the founder side or the investor side. And the people who I think will continue to be successful in venture, especially if you're just launching a fund today in 2025, 2026, like, you need to be a maverick. You need to have a different view on things. It might not work out. That, like, let's not say it's a sure thing. I'm not telling you go be a maverick. That will work. But the people who are successful as first-time founders are going to have some sort of maverick outlook.
Mm-hmm. No, what you're teaching me from this story is this kind of coaching to say, like, what's your superpower is maybe a little tough for people to self-identify, but what do people call you for? Like, Zach relies on this young kid for X, and like that's your superpower. Like, whatever you're getting texted questions in the middle of the night about, like, oh, that's where you're differentiated. It's
yeah, and look, to go back to your question about like, what does partnership really look like? Like, that is partnership. I want to have that sort of relationship with my GPs where like we can coach each other, and it should be a two-way street. Like, I would love for my GPs to tell me, hey, here's how you can be a better LP, whether it's to us or just in general. That's how you learn. And when the GP-LP relationship is just, hey, we show up with money, and then you turn that money into hopefully more money, and then you give it back to us, and then we give you more for your next fund. Like, that's so transactional. That's not what true partnership is going to be about. True partnership is going to be about, you know, we've known each other for 10 years. We have that texting relationship. You can text me at 9 p.m. on a Friday night, and we're gonna have a little exchange right then because you've got something on your mind, and that is the level of relationship that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything that is a super quick pass? Like if we could save you 100 emails a day, what's the one that you are just like, that's not for us? You didn't listen to the podcast. You're wasting my time.
You have a bad AI scraper.
It's hard to say that there's anything that is truly like, I want to throw out into the world. I'm never going to ever look at this because
Sure.
part of our value proposition to my clients is like, as HB, we're going to look at everything for you and find you the opportunities that we think offer the best risk-adjusted returns, or at least the most interesting for you risk-adjusted returns. But, I think, look, if you are coming to venture as a first-time manager and you previously were in a career that had nothing to do with technology or investing, and you woke up yesterday and you're like, I think raising a venture fund would be a really cool next step for me. That might be a great personal journey that you're on, but that's probably not going to be a fund that I'm going to invest in. There always needs to be here's why there should be that 5,001st venture fund. At the same time, from an alignment perspective, like the larger the fund gets, and once we're getting above that $1 billion range and we're talking about a very different sort of risk-adjusted return and a very different sort of venture math, that gets harder for us. Now, it's not to say that I'll never invest there, because obviously those are some of the most famous firms that are out there right now. They see every deal. They get access to just about every deal. And that, that's really important and really meaningful, both from a capital markets perspective, from a company growth perspective. And there are probably portfolios out there that is absolutely the right thing for. So I would love to be thoughtful about, is that the right thing for my clients or not? It's a different proposition than what venture used to be.
Yeah. Is there anything you wish GPs understood more about your role and your clients?
When it comes to my role, it's probably like, if I haven't answered your email, I'm sorry. I haven't answered it yet. I'm not ignoring you, but I got 40 of that exact email in a given day. And especially when it's annual meeting season, my inbox turns into a disaster. All of the LPs, we're all traveling all over the place, meeting with all of our GPs in person. We get to do our email on the flight home or on the weekend or in a couple of weeks, maybe when we have a week where we aren't actually traveling. So, as much as GPs are on the road, we're on traveling just as much. And I do my best to be as responsive as I can. But that's one thing. I think the other thing is just to, again, it's not that it's not you, it's me when I say no, but we're only going to make a few commitments a year. Let's say, very round numbers, we'll make 10-ish commitments in a given year. If we're saying no, it's not because you're not doing something that's really interesting. It's not because we think you're bad at what you do. It's not because we don't like the look of you. It's just we only have so many slots. It's a very small number. It's probably easier to get into an Ivy League school than it is to get any LP to say yes to your fund because of how many funds are out there. Mm-hmm. And, we're doing the best that we all can with the limited information that we have in the uncertain environment that we all live in from day to day. And we're all just trying to find, the right fit for our portfolio. And sometimes that's about the return profile. Sometimes it's about the risk profile. Sometimes it's about the industry. Sometimes it's about, what we think our cost of capital is or what we think your cost of capital is. And that doesn't mean that you're doing something that's wrong. like you, the GP. It just means that you're doing something that might not be the right fit for us, or that we already have in the portfolio and we just don't want more of.
And any final advice for high net worth families who are dipping a toe into venture on how they should approach this?
Look, every client is different, so it's really hard to give broad spectrum advice to any individual, especially just like out there on the internet. I think venture obviously is a very complex ecosystem. It's a very vibrant ecosystem. The outcomes, there's a huge dispersion in the outcomes, and so anyone investing in venture just should be very thoughtful about, how they're approaching it, and hopefully, either have a great network themselves or be working with someone who has the right network in venture. Because even as venture matures, and there are lots of people out there who talk about the democratization of venture and all of that, at the end of the day, it's still a cottage industry. The cottage has just gotten bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You may be at the big public school of the democracy.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of Ernest's public school ventures, and there may still be a small, very expensive university up the hill.
Yeah, we got it. We need some extra teachers in it. Zach, thanks so much for being on the podcast. We really appreciated your insights. I think I just wanted you to leave us with all the changes in private equity and venture capital. I talked to my PE friends, and they're having some of the same challenges of lack of liquidity and consolidation. What really kind of gives you optimism about the private markets over these next 10 years?
Look, the pace of innovation is only going to get faster. And venture is an industry that invests in innovation. So as that innovation cycle speeds up, that just means there will continue to be more opportunities, more interesting opportunities, and more world-changing technologies that are out there. And I'm excited to, spend my time, or at least part of my time, looking for the managers that have an idea about what that technology might be and what that company might be that's going to do the next world-changing thing.
Thanks you so much, Zach.
Thanks, Zach, for being on.
Thank you guys. It's been awesome being here with you.
See you later, alligator.
After Portfolio Tile, investing with a smile.